Hey, welcome back to Timeless Steel Garage. I know what you're thinking. Jimmy, you haven't made a video in a while. Well, you know the answer. I've been busy. But believe it or not, the Merc is what I want done more than any of these other cars. I used to daily drive this thing and I need it back in that position. So where we left off, if you might have seen some of the shorts, is I did the fuel system. Fuel system is all brand new fuel lines. We got an AEM high flow pump. We got a 100 micron pre-filter, 10 micron post filter, goes up into radiant fuel rail, O-side Tiger 440 injectors, fuel dampener, and then a radiant pressure regulator out the backside. I screwed up and you guys let me hear about a million comments about how I had the fuel lines reversed on a regulator. You are right. So the pressure needs to go into the rail and the return needs to go out of the regulator. And the fuel is regulated on the backside on a boost reference system. So now we're up to the point of seeing if past Jimmy left future Jimmy any problems and didn't bother to tell future Jimmy about it. So first thing we're gonna do is just put gas in the tank and see if we have any leaks anywhere. And then after that, we'll move on to pressurizing the system with a line disconnected into a bucket to make sure we get anything out of those new fuel lines out of the system. I already blew them out with air, but it's generally a good idea to run some fuel pressure through the line and get any gunk out of there before you send it into your really sensitive fuel injectors. Put a little in here and listen for it to all come out on the floor somewhere. Drink it. This is actually pretty cool. I mean, this is the first fluid we're adding to this new build. Next will be oil, then will be coolant, last to be air via the intercooler pipes, not a fluid, but you get the idea. I'm gonna pour about half this out and then look on the floor for where I didn't tighten a fitting. Generally, if you have a fitting that's barely on, this is gonna show that. Then once you apply pressure, you'll find out real quick which ones aren't tight. It's the first time I put gas in this car in well over a year. All right, there's about a gallon. Let's look on the floor. That's a good sign. Probably should look under the hood at the rail. It hasn't traveled all the way up here yet, but. All right, well, I say we put it all in there now. 2.5 gallons of ethanol-free premium going in. Should be putting an E85 in here, that'd be cool. Maybe in the future, you know, when I get this thing on the road and realize it needs to be faster, turn the wick up, change it over to E85. But that's really not my goal with this car. I want 400 wheel, reliable, believe it or not. Yeah, 350 to 400, somewhere in there. I think with these fuel injectors maxed out with 10% buffer, I think that's achievable. Okay. Re-inspect for leaks. I don't see anything. Let's go to the other side of the tank, which should have nothing over here yet. But a lot of spider webs, and I'm really not a fan of said spider webs, really. But I don't see any fuel coming out anywhere, so I would say step one was a success. The line coming right out of the tank, no leak. It's gravity fed, so that's a good sign. I got a 12-volt car battery and I got some alligator clips going to the fuel pump. I'm just gonna pressurize the system with the battery. I've got the feed line going back into the same tank that I poured the gas out of. I just want to get gas going through the lines and just basically vent the line and get any debris out of there back in the gas can and not in my fuel injectors. Once we do that, then we'll reconnect the line and check for pressurized leaks. You know what I am saying? Don't do this at home, kids. Is there fuel coming out? Oh, yay, there is. Fuel system test 2 successful. All right. Beak 'em. All right, now I don't see any leaks, obviously leaks yet, but we haven't really pressurized the system. So now I'm gonna reconnect the line. That's plenty of fuel to get any trash out of the lines out. And then we'll check pressure. Okay, step 3, fuel pressure line is hooked back up. Now we're gonna actually pressurize the pressure and return system. And I'm sure we're gonna find at least one leak. I mean, it's a brand new fuel system. I'm gonna look under the car for a little bit. Okay, it's making all the right sounds. Let's go check up front. Oh yeah, big time leak. All right, that's why we do the test. Where were we leaking? The regulator. Big time. Okay. All right. Well, that past Jimmy did not tighten that very well. So future Jimmy's now going to fix past Jimmy's problem. Okay, I found 3 leaks. First, you can see, if you can see down in there, that's the return line off the regulator, and I didn't even tighten that. It's finger tight, so that's why we do the test. I'm gonna tighten that one down. And then I also found that my front fittings aren't quite tight enough right here. So I'm gonna tighten those up, and hopefully that'll be all of our fuel problems. I did not find any leaks on anywhere else in the system. All right, so I fixed all the leaks, and we now have fuel pressure and no leaks. I don't want to run the pump long like that, but you can see right there we got 2 bar of fuel pressure, which equates to about, what is that, 35 psi? I can't really see it. Might be 30 psi. Yeah. So that's pretty close. I got to set it to factory GTE specs, but we can do that later. The good news is no leaks. So I'm officially stoked and excited to say fuel system is done. Okay, on to the oil system, but to do the oil system, I got to do the cooling system, which you might be confused, but I'll explain. So, talking to a buddy on Instagram who's also done a 2JZ MERC swap, and I'm thinking oil cooler, I might just put the oil cooler right here in the middle behind the grill. So right now I have the original supports for this bar cut out, and I've got intercooler mounts. This is sitting here. I picked up a couple of Ford Endling shock bushings, which I think are going to be perfect to pick up the slack here underneath these. You see this excess bolt I have. I need to put a rubber isolator under this intercooler with some washers. So I'm going to treat it like a shock basically. And then up here, I'm just going to fab a couple of mounts on each end that go to the front here to keep the intercooler stationary and supported. And then I'm going to put the radiator right here. Okay, I've got this oil cooler fan pack that I built disassembled, and here's why. I had this set up because it's what I used on the EcoBoost DeLorean, and it works great for a tight space that doesn't get airflow because it's a polar fan, helps cool the oil. But what I'm thinking is because I don't really have the space in here and this is such a small unit, I'm going to stick this little guy right here. I'll probably have to get rid of this factory Mercedes cooling line. But if you look at that, that's not going to be enough restriction to hurt the radiator, but it'll keep the oil flow nice and cool. And you can see I have plenty of room to write the oil lines right there on the driver's side of the radiator following the power steering lines. And actually, I think if I just take this little guy right here and go like this, I can, well, hold on, he's upside down. How about like this? If I take this little guy like this, I think this might work. Again, I'll probably have to get rid of the power steering lines. Let me play a little game here. Oh, well, hey, that works right there. Maybe not. I probably can bend those out of the way a little bit. But look at that. It'll bolt to the bottom of the cross frame connection here, and then I'll have to make some brackets that bring it up to the core support. And then the radiator, same thing. It sits a little low. So I'll make some brackets to tie to the core support, and then this is what we'll have. So we've got intercooler, oil cooler for the engine, aluminum radiator. I'm gonna have 2 spout fans on the front with a shroud. That'll clear just fine. It gets tight in here real quick, but the next test is to shut the grill and make sure that the grill will clear where it's sitting. All right, let's do a little test here. If this works. Oh yeah, look at that. You can see that little guy tucked in there, and it looks like, oh yeah, plenty of clearance. There's a solid inch, maybe even more than that. And you can see I can get rid of those horns if I want, get a little airflow in there, but the overall, you can see the cardboard of the radiator. There's plenty of airflow there. It's not gonna, and you're gonna get airflow through the oil cooler too. It's not like it's gonna block it. And I think that spot right there, I don't need a fan. It's got plenty of air coming to it. And that solves our problem. So now, what I can go ahead and do, let's get that hood back open. I'm excited about this. Okay, so now, like I said, we gotta do the cooling system, do the oil system. I wanna get this stuff all mounted up to where it's actually physically hard mounted to the car. I'm actually gonna try to keep these power steering lines. I think I can shorten that bracket a little bit, bend the line up, because believe it or not, this is a super simple way to cool your power steering with the old stool steering box. And it works great. So it's just one hard long loop, and the output side of the power steering pump just cycles through it, and this tube gets cooled by the air and it goes back through. And these things are tanks. It's worked great, so I really don't want to change the design. I'll probably just shorten this bracket and bend this up out of the way, and then I'll make 2 brackets. This will riv nut right here perfectly to the front of the car, and then I'll just make 2 brackets to support the top, make the 4 brackets for the radiator, and then I'll have to make a bracket for each side of the intercooler. Make sure everything's rubber mounted and isolated, which the nice thing about these Cetrab Sousa mounts, I don't know how to say that, Sousa? Cetrab USA. They come with rubber isolators already in them. So the cooler itself is already isolated. I don't really have to do that on these mounts themselves. I'm a fan, by the way, if I haven't told you guys before. I'm pretty sure I have. I don't look at anybody else when it comes to oil coolers. They're expensive, but they're expensive for a reason. If you pull a road course car, anybody that's serious about road racing, they're probably running a Cetrab oil cooler. So I run them, never had a problem with them. You get what you pay for when it comes to that. So anyways, all right, let's get to work. Starting to knock stuff off the list. We got a lot of stuff here. Oil system, cooling system. Man, I'd love to be able to write those 2 off, because if we can put oil in this motor, we already got gas in it, put coolant in it, and then all we got to do is wire it to fire it, throw some intercooler pipes on it. That stuff will go fast. Like, I'm getting excited now because we're not far from cranking this thing. I really want to hear this motor run. Fingers crossed I built it correctly. Okay, well, the first order of business here is I need to get rid of this gap. And put a rubber isolator under it, which will be simple enough with some washers and some bump stops. I've got these sitting on the shelf. Ford shock end link bushings. I think I can drill a couple of these out and they'll make a perfect intercooler bushing. Find some large $half shaped washers, and that'll be the rubber cushion on the bottom of the intercooler, and then we can work on the top straps for the intercooler, then move on to radiator straps and brackets, then mount the oil cooler. Then I can measure for oil lines, and I'll probably just order those, and that'll be it for today, probably. Okay, these intercooler mount bolts are M12, which is pretty standard for your Japanese intercoolers. Let's see what we got here. Oh, look at that. Shock bushing is going to be perfect. Like it was meant to be. Look at that. I don't even know if I need a washer on that. Put a little washer on top of it, send it home, and rubber isolation completed. Thanks, Ford. So check this out. I found an old shock top hat that I saved, which these bushings are meant for. Boom. Perfect sandwich for a rubber isolator for an intercooler. So I'm just gonna trim this little shock excess rubber off the bushing here. These little indentations on these rubbers are designed to slot inside sheet metal on a car to keep the bushing from moving around. But in this application that I'm trying to use it for, it makes the bushing a little bit too thick. So I'm gonna shave the bushing a little bit. And I'm gonna lube this bushing up with some grease. I think that's gonna work out great. That worked out perfectly. Shock top, shock rubber isolator from a Ford. I think those are actually old Mercedes. These are Mercedes. This is off the original shocks on the car, I think. I don't know. Some car that I've worked on in the past. But now the bottom of our intercooler is rubber isolated. It's got shock protection. I have not mounted the top, but it's not going anywhere right now, so I can start fabbing up the radiator mounts. Okay, I've made a lot of progress here. I got the headlights and turn signals and stuff pulled back out. I dropped the intercooler, went ahead and got the oil cooler mounted with some stainless steel hardware and rib nuts, M6. And then I'm like, wow, I have so much room between the intercooler and the radiator. What if I just flipped the fan that I was used to gonna have face this way backwards, because nobody ever said no to extra cooling capability, and it fits like a glove, like a glove. So when the radiator's there, it's well over an inch of clearance between the fan and the radiator, and that's a puller type fan, so that'll work great. And I had to ditch the Mercedes power steering cooling line. That's gone. That's fine, I needed some space anyway. So the bottom of this is mounted, rubber mounted already. Make some mounts that tie into the upper core support. That'll be super easy. This will be rock solid. As far as the rest of the oil system, I got to get a fitting for the top of the feed, which is standard turbo stuff. It's 8 NPT at the turbo side, and then you want a 4 AN male on the outside. And let's see here. I got the drain in the pan. You can see there, that's just a metal drain in the pan, and then I've got the 10 AN drain coming out of the turbo, so I need a line going from the turbo to the pan. And over on the driver's side, we have chase base sandwich plate there. I've got the oil feed coming out the left of the oil filter for the turbo, and then the bottom two are gonna be out in return for the cooler. And it's gonna work out pretty good now that I've made some room. Those oil lines are gonna come over to the frame where that power steering cooler used to be. They're gonna follow the frame down, come up over the intercooler in front of the radiator right here, which will be good because they'll get a little bit of that cooling effect on the oil lines too. So the oil system is done other than the lines. I went ahead and ordered, well, I haven't ordered them yet, but I measured these lines. I probably order them to save time. But 49 inches on the oil cooler lines, 9 inches on the turbo drain line, and 55 inch on the turbo feed line. I'm gonna route the turbo because of the cross member on the Mercedes. I'm actually gonna go down that side of the block, across the engine cross member, and then up. That'll keep it away from any exhaust. It'll be above the cross member, so it won't hit anything on the ground. And it'll get a little bit of that cooling effect because of the air coming underneath the car. So I measured them all. I add 2 inches to each, and that's how I come up with it. So oil cooler 51, turbo drain 11, turbo 57. That just accounts for fittings. I'm gonna have two 90-degree fittings coming out of here. Just do 90-degree fittings on the sandwich plate too. It'll be a 90 off the plate for the turbo, one straight fitting here, and then a 90 for the feed line. I went ahead and got the mass airflow sensor installed. I ordered this prefab mass airflow and housing. Of course, it didn't come with hardware or a gasket, so I made my own gasket, put the hardware in. So at least our mass airflow sensor will see air coming into the turbo for when we go to crank the motor. I'll have to figure, I don't have enough room here with this radiator for a traditional filter, so I'm probably gonna have to go down and hang the filter down here somewhere, because the headlight actually sticks out really far. So a lot of 2JZ people like to 45 the filter off the turbo. I don't have the room for that, so I'm gonna have to go down with the filter, or maybe even up, but the hood will be pretty tight. Hood clears this just fine now. And that's pretty much getting you guys caught up to where we're at. I just gotta either make some lines or order some. And then fan shroud for this Summit radiator. I measured the core width between the end tanks, 20¾ inches and 19 inches tall. If you're curious to what radiator I'm using, this is a Summit SUM-381325. I've got a stock IS300 oil filter, super oil filter. They're the same, I believe, with Toyota oil filter on there. I went ahead and deleted, for you guys that are familiar with these engines, I went ahead and deleted the oil pressure sensor on the upper pan. Don't need that. I got that from Drift Motion. There's a sick view of my gutted alternator power steering bracket. So we've got a lot of little stuff, believe it or not, a lot done today, because designing an oil system and measuring everything, all this little stuff takes time. I've been out here a couple hours doing this, so I'm gonna go in the house and eat some food because I'm getting hangry even though there's nobody around to witness it, and pet the dogs. And then I'm probably gonna sit down and start ordering some fittings and some oil lines. Because once I get the oil lines connected, we can put oil in the motor, which I'll probably pressurize the oil to get oil in every nook and cranny in the engine. I went ahead and drew up some fittings in, I didn't like those universal radiator fittings I showed you guys, so I just drew up some quick fittings and I had them sent to Send Cut Send, laser cut, stainless steel, and I'm gonna make little U-channel stainless cradles for the bottom of the radiator. So those little cradles are gonna sit here. Since this is already stainless, I'll be able to weld my little radiator cups right to that on both sides, and I'll still be able to remove everything because I'm gonna make them narrower than these bolts here. So the intercooler drop mounts and the radiator mount will still be removable. And then I'm just gonna tie into the upper core support here. I like stainless, it looks cool. I own a DeLorean, so it goes with, you know, par for the course, but shiny things, I'm like a crow. But just waiting on those to get here from Send Cut Send. And I tell you, like, I didn't have the stainless laying around, so I just used some scrap stainless here to kind of design what I wanted, and then drew it up for Send Cut Send. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but I just love that company. I know one of the guys that's part of the company. He's a DeLorean owner, great dude. And it was like 35 bucks for like 8 different brackets because I ordered extra. And it comes deburred, laser cut, basically ready to weld. And so if you're somebody out there that doesn't have a lot of metalworking tools, you really don't need them. I've got a cold saw, they call it, which is by far my favorite metalworking tool ever. And you just need a cutoff wheel, a couple of drills, and you can do all your basic stuff. And then honestly, if you just take the time to do cardboard fab and draw it, and QCAD is a free program, QCAD, QCAD, or it's like 10 bucks for like the not free version, which is worth it. And you just go in there, draw up your little metal part on a piece of cardboard, take the time to draw it in QCAD, send it to Send Cut Send. It saves you so much time in the long run. It stinks that you gotta wait a couple days for the parts, but once the parts show up, the finished product, unless you're someone that has a really awesome metal shop in their shop, which I don't. I have a lot of basic tools, but I don't have sheet metal benders. I don't have a really good drill press. I don't have, I mean, I've got a couple welders and your basic stuff. So I'm a huge fan of it. And by the time you buy steel to make it yourself, it would have cost me more to pay for the stainless to make these brackets than it's costing me to get them. So I think that's it for this episode. We got a lot of little stuff done. Next time I bring you back, we'll weld up the radiator, core support mounts. We'll get the top of the intercooler mounted. And hopefully we'll have the oil lines in hand. We'll put the oil lines in, and we'll have our cooling system basically done minus hoses. And we'll have our oil system done. Like, it'll be ready to put oil in. It's already got gas in it. Then we'll get some coolant stuff figured out. We're real close. Once I have fluids in this motor, all three, coolant, gas, oil, I'm gonna wire this thing. The wiring harness is already 75% there. So we're danger close to hearing this thing run for the first time. I'm really excited about it. So I hope you enjoyed this. I'm trying to get the 2Js on. I want it on the road this year. No excuses, no questions asked. I miss this car. It's my commuter and I want it back. So stay tuned, because we're getting hot and heavy on this car. We'll see you next time on Time with Steel.